Hi, Lindsay. Welcome to Funnel Vision. Thanks for joining us today. So excited to have you on.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Yeah. So today, like the topic that we are going to chat about is authenticity in sales, which is kind of a big thing where people talk about being authentic, but what does that mean? And how does that kind of contradict what people really think about the typical sales, pushy, kind of aggressive salesperson versus like being an authentic. So in your mind or in your experience, what does it mean to be authentic in sales, and why do buyers respond so strongly to that?
I think it's a couple things. I think number one, it's staying true to your personality and who you are. I think it's saying what you believe instead of what you think someone needs to hear all the time. And then I think a big piece is not going in with your own agenda, but truly trying to solve a problem for the person you are selling to. And to do that, you have to understand them and listen and know what their pain points are. Um, and certainly you're still selling but you need to understand how your product can actually help solve their problem versus your problem is you need to sell this product and that's what you're focused on.
Yeah, I definitely I definitely agree with that. It's so many things that you said right there is just like going in with that like help first attitude and listening, and sometimes like slowing down, right? Like and kind of just like taking it and slowing down. Like salespeople are, when you think about like that typical persona, sometimes it's like fast, aggressive, and like what people say like is salesy. But just like slowing that down and so like listening and like you said, like listening to the person and figuring out how you can help them versus it's not your problem. It's your problem is to sell, but you're trying to
Yep.
solve their problem, which is whatever it may be, and however your product or service can help them.
Mhm.
Like a lot of sales training that I've been through in the past and that people I know have been through, like encourages that like loud, extroverted, like ABC, always be closing type of mentality. Like how do you think companies can train reps like to close, but not like strip away their natural personality?
Oh, I think that's so important. I couldn't have said it better. It's like, I want you to do this job, but do it as you because you're going to be most effective doing it as you. I think one important thing is to, like you said, sometimes you'll hear, be louder or say it like this. And I think it's moving away from training on personality traits, is what I would call some of those things, to training on outcomes. So, one example I think of is instead of, you might hear someone say to a rep, be enthusiastic. Be more enthusiastic when you say that. What do they mean? They mean be louder, be more excited. But what you really should think about is what do you want out of that? And really, you want to make sure the buyer feels understood. Well,
Mm-hmm.
there's more ways to make sure the buyer feels understood than being really animated and enthusiastic. So it's helping people understand the outcomes and training them on the outcomes and the skills to get there versus focusing on traits that are more personality driven.
Yes, I definitely understand. Like that definitely makes a lot of sense. For what you're saying is focus on the outcome, and each person might get there in a different way. Also, like everybody has their natural personality, but to like leverage what works for you and not try to be someone else when you're doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one thing companies can do too often sometimes is use scripts. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that is one thing that compounds that. I don't think scripts are bad innately, but it's how you use them. They can be a good training tool, but it's helping people understand how to interpret them. I've worked with companies where they have scripts and people will go through them and you can tell it's not how they would talk. You can kind of
Yes.
hear when someone says something that's not them. And you ask them,
Mm-hmm.
is that how you would say it? No, it's not. Well, can you say it like take the themes, but how would you convey this to somebody? And they can get the same thing across in a way that is going to be much more natural. So that is one thing I would caution people about is scripts may have a place as a tool people can use, but really teaching them the principles behind what you're trying to sell and how you want to sell it. And if you do have scripts, making sure people understand this script is a guide, but you should make it your own and say things in the way you would naturally say them.
Yeah. And I've come across companies that I've worked with now and in the past that have those scripts and do not let people deviate from them whatsoever. And that it makes it challenging. It makes people sound like a robot. You're not getting that authentic person. And I think it really does, it's detrimental to the sale and to like connecting and like, when you're in sales, it's also about like connecting with the buyer, like, that you're here to help, you're educated on this topic. And when you have to read off of a script and you're not allowed to deviate from, exactly the words that are there in this order, it really just breaks down that trust because people, I mean, we all know, you can tell when somebody's reading off of a script or you're getting a telemarketer that's calling you that's just like monotone and reading versus actually engaging.
Yeah. And in this day and age, especially if you're doing any of your selling over the phone, you're going to have people start wondering if you're even a real person or if you're AI, if you sound too scripted. And I think people still want to connect with real people. And so you don't like, there's no point of having a human if you're going to turn them into a robot.
That's true. Yeah, that's exactly right. I've had some AI, telemarketing calls recently, and it takes a couple seconds to realize that the person isn't human. Or like you said, maybe they are human, but they're just not allowed to deviate from their.
Yep.
What are your thoughts on like hiring like introverts and introverted personalities in sales roles? How can leaders like develop people that are naturally introverted into, great talent for their teams?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that while they're not what people would stereotypically picture of a salesperson, introverts can be great salespeople when you think about it from the route of, I always tell people, don't think of it as selling, think of it as problem solving. Like that is your job as a salesperson to solve problems. And the great thing about introverts is they tend to listen more than they talk, which makes uncovering those problems that a buyer might have a lot easier to do.
Mm-hmm.
They ask really great questions because they're listening well and they think before they respond. They tend to like really think through, not just first thing that comes to their mind comes out of their mouth. So I think that certainly extroverts do well in sales, but there is a place for introverts because they do tend to build trust, although kind of at a steady pace. They do tend to build deep trust with those that they work with. You asked how leaders can develop them as well. I think it's a few things. One is I see sometimes when somebody is introverted in a sales organization, they tend to not speak as much, and you have leaders that mistake that for them not being confident. I think we have to stop mistaking quietness for lack of confidence. So understanding that person, what makes them tick, and evaluating them on outcomes, not their presence. You'll hear words like, hey, you got the job done, but, this is the way I would have done it. Well, the key part was the first part, made the sale, got it done. So really focusing on outcomes more than style in some situations. I've also heard, and I've worked with introverts. I had somebody that I was working with that said they kept having leaders tell them, you just need to talk more. You just need to talk more, speak up more. But they never coached them on when to talk. And because introverts tend to listen so deeply and think before they're responding, just saying talk more is not necessarily helpful. So it's really helping them think about, where do you feel like your expertise is? Where can you add the most value to the team? And let's think about ways that we can give you that platform to speak in those areas. So it's not just saying talk more, because it's not about quantity, it's about the value they can add to the conversation. So coaching them on finding those places where they can add the most value and speaking up at that time versus just talk more. And I think one thing that can help with that with introverts is giving them prep time before meetings. So introverts tend to want more processing time. So sending out agendas before meetings so that people know what the topics are and can think about them can help make sure that different personality types can all contribute.
Yeah, I love that. I think those are some really great ideas on how to build that, because I've come across, all types of salespeople. And of course we recruit salespeople, we talk to people all the time. And there are people who are, introverts, but by nature. And that doesn't mean that you are shy. And it doesn't mean that you are, not confident, but people, like you said, like people perceive it that way.
Mhm.
But it doesn't necessarily mean that you're shy. It just means that you're quiet. You talk less. You're listening more, like you said, and that those skills really can come in and make a great salesperson. One of the things, like, I think that I personally am, like, whenever I do one of those tests, I'm literally every single time 50-50. Like introvert, extrovert, like right in the middle. But I think, like, some of my introverted skills and, like, those, like, listening and kind of all that, like being prepared, think before you speak most of the time, like are things that have helped me, throughout my career. So it's a unique balance of, finding that right person that can get the job done.
Absolutely. And I think just allowing people permission to be themselves. A lot of times people think that just continuing to kind of poke at someone who's not speaking will help. But it's often not that they don't have the motivation to contribute. It's that they need the space to do it. So making sure that that's your job as a leader, is to make sure that there is a space for everybody to add the value.
Yeah. And there may also be different types of sales positions that are better for introverts than extroverts. Like, for example, if you're a hunter, you need to be, and you're out, you're networking, you're meeting people. Introverted person may not be comfortable in those type of environments, but may be comfortable in, they're getting inbound leads and they're great at selling and closing, but they're not as great at, like, knocking down doors and, kind of doing those things. So there's also different, the different personality types work well in different parts of the sales process too.
Yeah, absolutely. And certainly in anything where you're trying to build long-term customer relationships.
Hmm. Yes, exactly. What are some red flags that a salesperson is, like, slipping back into that, like, sales stereotype instead of, showing up as their authentic self?
I think there's a few. We've been talking a lot about listening, so we can go to the flip side and say talking. So talking too much, talking over people. I think overuse of buzzwords is a big one for me. That just feels gimmicky. So there's always, phrases of the day within any industry. So overusing any buzzwords in your industry. I think there's a piece of, sometimes something just isn't a fit for someone, or you haven't uncovered how your product or service can solve their problem, and ignoring what I would call, like, hard truths that the buyer is telling you. Like, we don't have the pricing to pay for it. This service won't fit for our business, and just continuing to sell and push, and refusing to acknowledge that, like, they could think this is great. They don't have money to pay for it. So I think acknowledging what people are saying, and not talking over them. And that one, I think, goes really hand in hand with starting to close the deal and move on to, let's sign here before actually getting alignment
Mhm.
with the buyer. So you're talking over them, pushing, they're not there yet, but you're closing the sale and taking out a contract, or a PO. I think that certainly shows that somebody is slipping into those stereotypes. And then the other thing I would say, and this really goes to what we talked about with scripting, is if you go on several sales calls with somebody and they sound the same, no matter who they're talking to, there will be similarities because you want people to be themselves. But when it sounds like they're reading a script in a call, that starts to, I think, sound inauthentic as well.
Yeah, that's very true. Like if every time you talk it, because although you're saying similar things, you're selling the same product when you're talking to different people, understanding their challenge, understanding like what their pain point is and speaking to that. And so like understanding, listening, and then changing what you're saying based on, what their clients' needs are versus just trying to get through your script and saying all the words,
Yep.
um, not thinking. So that I think that makes a lot of sense. In your experience, what are some practical steps that companies can take to ensure like their sales culture values authenticity over instead of outdated, tactics?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think number one, really think about how you define to your sales organization what great selling looks like, and make it less about style and more about things like trust, clarity, buyer success, so that we're talking about those things more than we're talking about your personal style. I think when people are hiring, which I know is near and dear to your heart, I would say hire for curiosity and not charisma.
Yes, yes.
I think we've all seen that charismatic person that comes on board and you're just like, they were great, but they're just not getting the results. I think sometimes charisma can mask bad habits, but curiosity very rarely does. Somebody who really wants to understand and really wants to know what makes somebody tick is going to connect with a consumer or a customer long term more than somebody who is all style and less substance.
Yes.
So I think those are a couple of things. I would also say highlighting diverse selling styles within your organization with your successful reps. So making sure that you're not just highlighting wins from your most extroverted salespeople, because the introverts are also the least likely to share it themselves. So making sure that you're taking the space when you're doing recognition to highlight what those reps are doing, those really either their analytical work, their relationship building, but raising that up so others see, hey, it's okay that I'm not like this person on the sales team that might be the person who's usually the most outspoken. And then the last thing I would say is training your managers first. Sometimes we feel like we should go straight to those frontline sales folks, and they are the most important for the outward presence of our company. But at the end of the day, reps will mirror their leadership. And so I think it's important that you're doing the same things in your organization with your leaders, recognizing different styles, making sure that they see the value in different types of people and how they sell. Because if they can recognize it in a peer, which is sometimes easier, they can recognize it within their team as well.
Yeah, yeah. I love everything that you said there. That all is so true. And going back to the curiosity over charisma, I talk about that all of the time, because all of the time I have conversations with business owners who say, same story. I had a great interview with this person and they were we had such a great conversation. And so I hired them. Okay, great. Like that's important. You should have a good conversation and they should be personable. But like, are they curious? Do they have the skills that you need for the role? It's not just, being a salesperson is not just the charisma that people think it is, kind of it is, there's a lot more to it. and digging in on that is like a lot. We have that issue all the time with our clients. Like, I hired this guy because he had a great conversation during his interview. And that was kind of where that it stopped, as far as the digging. So, and curiosity is one of those big things that we look at too. People that ask questions, and when you're interviewing people, like specifically, like, are they asking questions? If you've got a salesperson that you're interviewing and they're not asking you questions about the company, the role, the day to day and everything, that should be a red flag. Like, always looking for that curiosity is so important.
Yeah, 100%. And it's not that people with high levels of charisma can't be great employees, because of course they are. But to your point, it's after the interview when you're thinking of hiring somebody and thought is, I don't remember much about what this person said, but they were a lot of fun. It's like, you've really got to think about, well, was it just it was a great conversation because they were, great at chatting with people? What was the substance behind, and what were the skills that were indicated? So making sure that we're evaluating based on career and work history and skills, and not just evaluating on personality and who you had the most fun talking to.
Yes. And it's hard. It's hard. A lot of people
It
do get
is.
stuck down get stuck down that path. Yeah, so I definitely agree. But Lindsey, tell us a little bit about you, your background. Where can people find you? What do you do, and all that good stuff?
Yeah, sure. So I spent over 2 decades in corporate America, working in sales leadership and trade marketing. And now I do consulting, helping small and mid-sized businesses build out their sales infrastructure. So I like to say, if you are scaling or looking to scale, there's a foundation you need to build to enable you to do that. Everything from making sure you have solid KPIs, a system that works for you, and onboarding and training. So really making sure that those foundational blocks are in place that will give you the capability to scale quickly. And do that work across the country, but out of Dallas-Fort Worth, where I'm a partner at 360 Consulting.
Wonderful. And people can find you on LinkedIn. Is that the easiest place to get to you?
Yes, that is the easiest place to connect with me, on LinkedIn. And all of my, can connect with me through LinkedIn, or my contact information is there as well.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for being on Funnel Vision today. Really appreciate it. I think it's a great conversation and such an important topic on authenticity. So thank you so much. Appreciate your time.
Thank you. It's always fun chatting with you.
Thanks.